You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
Welcome in, everybody. Ethan here for the Blue Note podcast.
Mike here.
And welcome. One-stop shop for all things St. Louis Blues, episode number 10.
That's right. It's the Braden Shen episode. I don't know if you can be able to go with many other players other than Shen here at this point.
Yeah, definitely a good number 10. Say what you will about the postseason performance from this one, but I mean, what can you do? He scored a goal in Game 7 of the Cup final in 19, if that counts for anything, which I think it does. Kind of the goal that put it away, made it 3-0. But before we get into it today, previewing kind of the offseason, discussing what the Blues could look to do this summer, a few other things, and we got something else coming later this week as well on top of episode 10 here today. But we want to thank the listeners. Remind to hit that subscribe button. There's a plus button next to a lot of the platforms and the description of the podcast. You'll see a little plus. You hit that and it'll do whatever it needs to do. But you won't miss a single episode. Give us a 5-star rating if you enjoy. If you don't, I guess don't give us a rating, but if you want to and be honest, that's fine, I guess. Not, whatever you want to do. It's a free country, right? Leave us a comment, get involved with the conversation over on Twitter at TBNPod. You can follow us there and share the podcast on social media. So other Blues and Thunderbirds fans, the AHL squad, of course, can find us. And we're recording this before Game 7. The Thunderbirds playing the Laval Rocket tonight. Eastern Conference Finals, the American Hockey League. Game 7, that'll be a big one. Had a chance to clinch during Game 6, fell short of that, but they'll be playing tonight, Wednesday night, for a chance to get to the Calder Cup Finals. So we'll find out. And let's throw it over to you here, because tonight's Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final. The Colorado Avalanche, who, by the way, the Blues the only team to beat still in this postseason, and the Tampa Bay Lightning Game 1 in Colorado. Who do you like?
It's hard not to be able to like the Tampa Bay Lightning, but I've got to go here with the Colorado Avalanche here at this point. You just got to. This team is so deep; they're just rolling here right now, and I've got to be able to hear just roll with the Avs.
There's a definite chance that me picking against the Lightning for the 4th time this postseason, so every round is stupid, but I'm doing it again. I think the Avs set the tone, win tonight. I think they win game I think they win in 6. So we'll see. A very interesting Cup final though ahead. Let's start this off here. Let's go around the Central Division real quick. Couple moves of note that were made by a couple other teams in the Central. So I'll toss it over to you to discuss that.
A couple small ones here. Dallas, they signed Frederick Karlstrom and Nicholas Camano to a 1-year, 2-way contract. Just some small low depth signings here at this point. They also traded local boy Ben Bishop's contracts to the Sabres for a 2022 7th-round pick. He's just the next player to have his contract here just sent over as the move for cap space, as cap space becomes a valuable commodity here. Nashville also re-signed defenseman Jeremy Lauzon to a 4-year contract worth $2 million here annually. And the Winnipeg Brewery is attempting to sway coach Barry Trotz with free beer for life if he accepts a coaching position here. Say what you want here about the Winnipeg Jets and the Winnipeg native, but man, free beer for life. If you are a drinker, that's a good deal.
And I'm sure Trotz is. He kind of looks like that. I'm not, he looks like he probably is one of those, but that would be a great hiring. I think everybody knows how good of a coach Barry Trotz is, and I personally don't want to see him come to the Central Division. But as other jobs get filled, it certainly seems like that's going to happen. Whether it's, you look at Tortorella likely going to Philly, you look at Cassidy going to Vegas, and it certainly looks like Jim Montgomery is probably going to get hired by somebody, probably Boston.
Definitely.
I think Boston will be the team that hires him, and we'll see, because you look elsewhere in the division. I mean, the Lauzon deal is, to me, and this is just me in terms of the Lauzon deal, how I feel. I think a lot of people feel this way as well. The Jeremy Lauzon deal is horrendous. Like 4 years for a guy who's not good. He was not good last year at all. Maybe, leaving Boston was tough because he kind of fit in there and they have a bit of a better structure than Seattle did and even Nashville, I guess, last season. But a 4-year deal for him is horrible to me. And you hate to see it.
$2 million annually, though.
It's low, but like
that's not bad.
4-year, the term there is ridiculous. Like that's just like he's not good. That's the problem. And if you have 6 guys in front of him, you're going to be having $2 million just sitting there. And with the current state of the salary cap, you don't really want to have more than like $1 million sitting there for nothing, and that's kind of the way that I view that. In terms of the other moves, nothing real notable here. The Bishop thing is like, unfortunately, his career is over. It sucks. He was really, really good. Obviously, St. Louis, and of course, but a smart move by Dallas to get that off the books, and a couple depth signings as well by them. And we'll see what else happens around the Central, because you still got Chicago hiring a coach. Winnipeg's going to hire a coach. You still have other situations. What's Winnipeg going to do with their team? Arizona, we know, is terrible, but they could still, make some big headlines this summer. And Minnesota is another team that's kind of cap strapped. We're going to see how Bill Guerin dances around all of that. So there's a lot that's going to happen in the Central this summer. We'll talk about it all as we go. Let's get into a couple of preseason notes for the Blues in this preseason, and it's already happening with preseason notes. So what do you got?
Yeah, I can't believe the fact that we're already getting preseason notes here, which is absolutely fantastic. But some news here: the Blues are headed back to Kansas City. They're going to be playing at the Cable Dahmer Arena, home of the Kansas City Mavericks, here on October 1st in a preseason game here against the Dallas Stars. It's going to be the second consecutive year that they're going to be playing there in front of a seating capacity here of nearly about 6,000 after hosting Chicago last season. So last year they sold out the game here in about 6 hours, and they're expecting to have a similar type of sale here this year. So it's great if you get the chance to be able to go. Anybody listening that wants to provide us tickets, we would love to attend, as all proceeds here also will help fund the Kansas City group's mission to grow the game in the Kansas City metro area. So if you get the chance to be able to go, I highly, highly recommend it. Then it was also announced here earlier today that the Blues will also be playing the Arizona Coyotes in a preseason game on September 24th at Intrust Bank Arena in Wichita, Kansas. So what do you think here of like these non-traditional preseason games here, just really fast?
Well, I think it's something that's kind of, all in good fun, right? I think it's something that's kind of interesting to look forward to. I think preseason games in your own arena is kind of boring, to be honest.
They're fun. Be able to bring the kids out too, especially if you're at a cheaper game.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I also think that having them in certain areas, as long as the ice is good and it's a tenable arena, I think that's fun, especially for an area that doesn't have hockey in the NHL.
Exactly.
And I think there's an argument to make that Kansas City would be much better than Arizona, but whatever. I also think that Kansas City is probably if they had another expansion team, which won't happen forever, or a relocation, I think Kansas City is probably 4th or 5th in the list. I would think behind Houston and Quebec probably.
Yeah. Kansas City, I think you can really make a big argument for the fact that they could easily, I think, be able to get a team here.
Look at their success in other sports too. The Chiefs are a big NFL franchise. The Royals have had some success in Major League Baseball. They have a great stadium. I think that's a big part of their appeal, but they've had success in other sports, no doubt. And it's a good sports city. I think it's not, I don't know if I'd compare it to St. Louis in terms of two teams, but the big thing for the Chiefs in Kansas City is kind of the selling point and what they've been recently and the success. So I think Kansas City is a very good sports town.
Yeah. And I love them being able to go to different markets, like you said, ones that don't necessarily have a hockey team or even like a professional hockey team here at that, help be able to grow the game. If a team could go, say, one game of their preseason to a non-NHL market, I mean, just think of what that could do to potentially help grow the game. I would love the fact that they could go and do an international series, take them to like Finland or Germany here or the Czech Republic or something. That's all great fun, but keep growing the game here on the same continent here at least. Is there a way for them to be able to go into like Mexico? Boy, that'd be cool. Be able to do other games here in Canada. That'd be fun. But, there's so many different places that's just right here in the States that they could do that would just be just fantastic. So I love the fact that they're doing this.
I agree 100%. Let's do the off-season outlook in some forms. We'll have other stuff this offseason covering this type of stuff, but we'll start with a few housekeeping notes that you have here and some things to think about entering the offseason.
Absolutely. So Jeremy Rutherford over at The Athletic, he did a fantastic job at breaking down the Blues cap situation for this offseason. So factoring in some of his work along with some information here over at Cap Friendly, the salary cap next season will increase by $1 million to $82.5 million. However, the Blues will actually have about $1.1 million in bonus overage from the 21-22 season, which I believe mostly is from the Tyler Bozak bonus, if I'm correct here on that, which was from the number of games here that he played during the season that initially kicked in that bonus for him. So,
which is ridiculous, by the way.
Well, they weren't necessarily planning on him playing that many games, injuries, COVID, all those different things. So, I do appreciate that we had a veteran like Bozak that was still on the team. And the fact that he got his structure, that's great. I think that the NHL needs to do something a little bit more in bonus overages and penalties here going into the following season, but we'll see.
I don't see a ton of scenarios where teams should be penalized in that way. Like, I think the LTIR thing is within the rules for the most part, but it's a bigger issue than this. Like, that's kind of stupid, especially with the way that the cap is now. I think there's a lot of teams getting penalized for this. I think there's multiple teams. So the fact that we're gonna have a lot of teams with less salary cap space than they should have is a little bit absurd to me, but I guess that's just the NHL at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely one thing to have, like you said, the LTIR for a team, like Minnesota, they're the ones who are going to have like the least amount of cap space. And that's simply just because of, guys that they bought out or anything else, that would be certainly understandable. But to have bonus overages just simply due to clauses, that kicked in for performances or something, I don't know, and I don't have a solution for it here at this point, but I guess you have to be able to choose to do something. So, so the Blues, according to Cap Friendly, they currently have 18 players under contract here next season with a combined cap hit of $72.4 million. So with that $1.1 million bonus overage, that brings them up to 73.5, leaving them with about $9 million to fill out their roster. So while that's something to be able to remember, you also cannot forget about those two-way contracts. Alexei Toropchenko, who is pretty much a foregone conclusion that he is going to make the team here next year, and a guy like Nathan Walker, both of those guys are on two-way contracts. Again, Toropchenko is expected to be able to make the roster. He's going to be making $750,000, which is currently accounted for in the cap. Walker may or may not make the roster. He's also making $750,000, and we'll discuss here about those extra forwards here at this point. The Blues forwards, they've got 9 guys on one-way contracts. They're all your top-end guys here at this point, plus a guy like Logan Brown. So let's just assume here that Toropchenko is going to take that number 10 spot. Walker then is someone who, or somebody else at the league minimum, he would take spot number 11. Then your 12th forward could be somebody in the neighborhood of Jake Neighbors. He's going to be making here at about $860,000 and change for the start. And that was the guy then that starts eating away at that available salary cap space. So the Blues have some options, but they don't have that many options when it comes to salary cap space and available roster spots for some of these guys.
And that's why we'll talk about the defense in a minute, but the Scandella deal can't be on the books next season if they want to fix the defense or try to make it better. And with the forward group, it's how do you view Jake Neighbors? Because as the forwards are currently constructed, he can't play in the top 9.
Right.
Because unless you trade a Barbashev or if Tarasenko shockingly gets traded, I don't know if I want Neighbors here if he's playing on the 4th line. That's not great for his development, playing 9 minutes a night.
No.
So that's a problem there that you have. And you also have that same problem with eventually when Bolduc breaks through, which I think will be a couple of years from now, if not sooner. So that's a big thing you got to worry about too. And the other thing is, are they going to do Bull Duke what they did with Neighbors last year and bring him up for 9 games? I mean, there's a chance. Like, I didn't think that Neighbors was very impressive in the preseason. If Bull Duke is the same way, then you probably throw him in there for 9 games. And that's just different. You can kind of play him wherever you want. You want to play him for 8-9 minutes a night on the fourth line for 9 games. I think that's perfectly fine with me if it's not overtaking somebody like Toropchenko. But so I just don't love the idea of having Neighbors playing on the fourth line if he gets here next season.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know off the top of your head if Jake Neighbors is AHL eligible at this point, or if he would need to go back to another season in the WHL. You know, he and the Edmonton Oil Kings, they just won their championship here at the WHL. They're going to be playing for the Memorial Cup here this upcoming here just very soon. So, you know, he's already proven that he can play down in the CHL. He's proven that he can succeed in the WHL. And so I don't know what more that he needs to do to just earn a spot here in the NHL, other than the fact that the Blues they don't have any spots available for him, you know, and call that a good problem to have, you know, but you also have to be able to consider here about your future with a number of those contracts coming up. And so the Blues are going to have a tough decision to make here with those forwards. So do you want to get into the defense here just as of yet?
Yeah, I'm trying to do some on the spot research here to figure out.
No, it's fine.
When Neighbors can be. So he wasn't eligible last season. Junior hockey players that are 18 or 19 must return to their junior clubs if not retained by their NHL team beyond 9 games. So they won't have the option to call him up again until his junior season is complete. That's from October. So I guess it depends on when he turns 20. I guess. I think
that's what it sounds like.
He is 20 now, so he could probably play. But I feel like I don't know. He had 45 points in 30 games for the Oil Kings last year. He was
plus that injury.
Captain.
Plus that injury.
And he was their captain. So yes. I'd love to see him here next year, but I just don't see a spot for him in the top 9 without injuries, which, I mean, I don't really see Armstrong touching the top 9. Like, if he's going to touch it, it's going to be Barbashev, I think. And I don't think he's going to do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, unless somebody comes to Armstrong here with an enticing deal, or he gets lumped into a package of some kind. So we'll see. If we're wrong here on this, you know, somebody feel free to comment here in the comments section. Feel free to be able to send us a tweet, be able to let us know, you know, that we're dumb and we don't know what we're talking about here as far as a deployment here of Jake Neighbors. So, all right, you ready to get into the defense?
Let's do it.
All right. So the team currently has 5 of their 6 defensemen here on one-way contracts for next season: Falk, Krug, Parayko, Scandella, and Robert Bortuzzo. They did, if you remember, just re-sign Calle Rosen a few weeks ago to a 2-year, $750,000 average annual contract here, which again is factored into the current cap hit here for the Blues. He could be on the roster here next season. They still have a couple of decisions to be able to make regarding Niko Mikkola and Scott Perunovich, both who are becoming RFAs, restricted free agents here for those who don't know, and they need to be able to get new contracts here as well. According to The Athletic here again with Jeremy Rutherford, he is saying that Mikkola is the only one of the 2 that has arbitration rights. And if the team is to move forward with Mikkola, which I do believe could very well happen. I just, again, without really wanting to be able to move on here from him just yet, or unless somebody comes barging down the doors and, you know, asking here about Mikko Nikula, he could be able to see a bump in around $1 to $1 million from his $787,000 pay here last season. Perunovich is going to be a little more difficult here with his injuries limiting his time to only 19 games, but he had a successful AHL campaign. So if you think about it here, it's really, really tough to say what Perunovich here is going to end up being able to get, but Rutherford is projecting here about $900,000. Say it's like a 1-year deal, $900,000. You know, I don't think that's bad. Again, figuring out what Mikkola has at 787, $900,000 for a guy who's only had 19 NHL games, not bad. I think it's very acceptable.
I agree. I think Prunovich is a guy you got to make sure is in the lineup if he's healthy next season. And that's where I kind of wonder, like, as much as some of these defensemen that they have are like Rosen is kind of enticing to throw him in the lineup if you need him. I think you got to get a bigger defenseman that skates a lot better and handles the puck a lot better with Parayko, because Scandella is not that. Leddy was more of that. So you got to find something there. We'll talk about wish list later, which is definitely going to include defensemen. But for Mikkola, I had a lot of opinions on him. I think he was horrible at the end of the season, if we're being honest. In the playoffs, I think he was solid. I may have been a bit harsh on him. If you read our report card series in the hockeywriters.com, gave him a D+. I think you got to expect a lot more, because he looked last season like he was starting to come around. He was going to be legitimate, maybe top 4 guy defensively, and he was very bad late in the season. Like, I think he was a -11 in the final 14 games or something. So that's a problem.
If you look at it here too, Mikkola was a guy who was projected to be able to come in and just simply play a depth role. I don't think that they really expected much from him. And because of those injuries, the same thing like Scandella, he was thrown all over those pairings and just asked to sprint before he was ready to be able to crawl here at this point. So, I'm not saying that he wasn't capable, because there was plenty of games that, Sidney Crosby knows he's capable at this point. Yeah. If you remember that fight here that he had with Crosby, he's a guy that I think could still have top 4 upside, good physical defenseman, but I just don't think that he's ready just yet to be able to take on that role. And so I think that's where some of his missteps, miscommunications, he's just not ready to take those steps. And it was just unfortunate that the Blues had to go to him so early on and be able to ask him to be able to answer that call just super early in his NHL career.
I think that's fair. I just expected more. I think in hindsight, my grade was probably a little too shocking for everybody. Probably not the right grade. I think maybe C would be more fair, but you got to do what you got to do. And at the moment and the research I was doing, I felt like I don't think he deserved a good grade, which I still don't think he does, but I think D+ is probably a bit far, but that's all right. I'm not sure what they'll do with him next year. I think ideally he's playing on the third pair with Bortuzzo, but the problem is you have Krug who's undersized, you have Prunovich who's undersized. I don't know. Prunovich and Parayko I think would work if Parayko was better, but he hasn't been. So that's tough. And I think, I don't know. It's like it's not the depth is not the issue in the back end. It's just how they're playing. Like, I think Krug and Falk are fine. We know that. I think Bortuzzo is kind of locked in as your third pairing right-handed defenseman. And then second and third left-handed is where the issue comes in. So, and you got to have Prunovich in there unless you're going to trade him, which I highly doubt happens. So it's a tough question, and it's one that they've had for, ever since the bubble. Yeah.
Since Bouwmeester.
So, yep. It's a problem.
Yeah. And like you said, the depth for the Blues, especially on that back end, isn't a problem. In my opinion, it's the talent level within that depth pool. You've got plenty of guys who can be able to play that third pairing, that middle pairing, but you don't have a good player who can be able to jump up and play top pairing minutes here, especially alongside of Colton Parayko. Again, if you want to be able to have a bunch of just specialists that are going out there, that's fine, but it's going to end up coming back and be able to bite you in the ass here in the end, because you need a guy who can be able to go out and play 23, 24, 25 plus minutes here every single night in all situations.
And also there's a reason the Blues were able to just throw Jake Wallman into that trade for Leddy, because they have a ton of depth, and Wallman is just like, we can just throw him in there. We don't need him. And let me just tell you this too, like, the final game of the season, game 6, was an issue on the power play. Their power play in that game was horrendous. They didn't have Prunovich, they didn't have Krug. And we know Krug was begging to play and wanted to play. I don't see why you don't just, take Nathan Walker out of the lineup and throw in a 7th defenseman like Krug or Prunovich and use them on the power play, because 11-7 was working and the Blues went away from it at the end of the season to end the season. So I think that's kind of something you look back on, you could have done differently, but over an entire regular season, you'd rather have, more well-rounded defensemen than some of these specialist types. But
Yeah.
Doug Armstrong has clearly emphasized getting better offensively in the back end with Falk, who is kind of known as much more of an offensive defenseman when he was with Carolina. I think now he's much more of a two-way guy. Last couple of seasons, he's been elite in both ends for the most part. Krug's been an offensive guy, but I think his defense is pretty solid because he's a veteran and he knows, what to do. Parayko, just a couple months, he was really good this season. And after that, it just wasn't. And then, I don't know. They don't have enough well-rounded defensemen, and hopefully they can change that. But I think it's going to be tough to do with the current salary cap structure. That's going to be an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how this team's going to address it, because accounting here also for Jordan Binnington here in goal, the Blues have about, $75.6 million against the cap, or just under about $7 million in cap space here at this point. So that's just something for Blues fans to be able to remember as they keep going into this offseason and just saying what we want, what we need, because you can be able to say we need, we want here as much as possible. But at the end of the day, the budget's the budget. And you have to be able to do what you have to do here at this point if you are looking to keep things the way that they are. If you're only looking at adding and you're not looking at subtracting, the Blues don't have much room. So at this point, the Blues are going to need a backup or a tandem goaltender. So who do you think? Let's address it here this way. Ethan, what do you think that the Blues are going to end up doing here with their backup and tandem goaltender?
So I think it's a major question because I think we're pretty sure that Ville Husso is gone.
Yeah.
And I was listening to the 32 Thoughts podcast, obviously Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman, who are very good at what they do.
Yeah.
I think it was Merrick who said the Blues think they're fine if Husso leaves because they really, really like what Joel Hofer is.
Mm-hmm.
And Charlie Lindgren's been solid as well. So I think I could very much see a scenario where they start Binnington, Lindgren, and then if Lindgren's struggling, you go with Hofer because of how good Hofer's been very good in the AHL this season.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big thing that Armstrong likes is Hofer. He's still pretty young, but I think that he showed a little bit of something when he was up with the Blues last season. So I'd be kind of surprised if they went out of house for this.
Okay. See, and the biggest thing that I worry about is, a lot of the fans in the media are saying that the Blues are, again, they're the only team who has beaten the Avalanche here at this point. They're right there to be able to contend. But where would you have been without Ville Husso this season? Where would you have been? And I'm not saying that the Blues need to be able to pony up the dough to be able to pay Husso, because I don't think that's happening. But I don't know if Charlie Lindgren is the right option. And maybe I'm wrong here in that, Charlie Sideburns looked great last season. I don't know. You're just gambling, I think, a lot at that goaltending position here on Jordan Binnington and Charlie Lindgren.
I don't think you're wrong. I think the big thing is you look at some of the big teams in the league right now. It's like they usually have a horse number one and like a veteran number two solid and can come in. A good example of that is Tampa Bay. They have Vasilevsky, who's their horse, and they have Brian Elliott behind him.
Yeah.
So I think that is kind of a model you could look at. Make Binnington your guy, your number one guy playing 60-plus games every season, and then make your number two a veteran. Like I mentioned a couple episodes ago, Braden Holtby, if he's healthy and ready to play again, he's not going to be getting very much in the open market, and he's a good veteran backup that you could throw in there when Binnington doesn't play. So I like that model as well. I think having an experienced veteran backup who's maybe a little bit older but can still play, kind of like what Boston had with Yarrow Halak a few years ago behind Rask. So I think that would be a good model to look at, but I don't think the Blues are going to go that way. I think they're going to save their cap space and they're going to roll the dice with Lindgren and have Hofer there if they need him, I think is what's going to happen. And I don't love it, but I understand it.
Right. Yeah. The Blues are going to be, I think if they can move on from Binnington, I think that they would do that simply just because of the $6 million cap hit that he's currently getting. And again, Husso's not coming back. Unless he just simply wants to come back and do the Blues a big solid and just say, I'm just going to stay here in St. Louis. The Athletic has a market value here of $4.1 million for Husso here right now. Evolving Hockey has him at nearly $5 million. And it's not crazy to think because Husso is actually already 27 years old. You know, some people think that he's like this 22, 23-year-old kid that's coming up. He's 27 years old. Thatcher Demko in Vancouver, he signed a 5-year, $25 million contract at 26. Linus Ullmark in Boston agreed to a 4-year, $20 million contract at 27. And so $5 million here for Husso is not out of the question, in my opinion. So at that point, you would have $11 million combined between Jordan Binnington and Ville Husso. And the Blues, as we said, have about $7 million here in cap space. You cannot be able to justify giving $5 million here to your other goaltender when you've got guys like David Perron that need to be able to re-sign here with the Blues. So yeah, going with somebody here at a lower cap hit, like a Joel Hofer or a Charlie Lindgren, the latter I think is more of a likely option that will happen. That's likely what you're going to see here next season.
I'd love to see a team take that risk on Husso because I don't want the Blues to do it. I don't think they will either. And it's a big risk because Husso was not very good last season. This season he was really good. Last season, not so much. Now, did he find something? You never know. Goaltending such a fickle position. He was good in the playoffs, but not great. I don't even know if I'd say good. I think he was average in the playoffs and let in a couple where you're like, that's not good. But it makes much more sense for other teams to take that risk. Edmonton is going to be desperate. They need to take a risk. Now, John Gibson possibly being on the market definitely changes things for certain teams that need goaltending, whether it's Edmonton or Toronto trying to be aggressive. So I wonder if Edmonton or Toronto, if one of them trades for John Gibson, does the other one turn to somebody like Husso on the open market? I could see that happening. But we'll see what he gets. I think 4.1 is about right. I think 4.5 would be the ceiling. I think somebody might be able to get him at like 3.5. But you never know with these things. It's like sometimes you expect a guy to get 12 a year and he gets like 9.5.
Yeah.
So
just because the market value is saying one thing doesn't mean that's what's going to go for. And who knows?
Does the NHL front offices, do they view the market value the same as, websites do? Probably not.
Right. Yeah. And, if, especially if the housing market has taught us here anything, just because a house is listed at, $275,000 doesn't mean that the house isn't going to sell here for $310,000.
Yeah. And a hockey example as well is, do people think Seth Jones is worth $9.5 million a year last season? Like how like some of the moves that NHL GMs make seem crazy to the outside. And $9.5 million a year for Seth Jones, who was coming off of a horrendous season in Columbus, 9.5 is ridiculous. I think his market value, according to the Athletic at that point, was probably like $7 million, $6 million at the most. And Stan Bowman decided to, he didn't lose his job because he lost his job for very other serious, stupid reasons for him. He's an idiot. I mean, let's just be honest about it. I don't want to make any exception for that. No doubt about it. But he did a really bad job there on the way out. And I loved it because it was Chicago. We don't like them. But I just think that the way that the NHL GMs view certain players, like Jack Johnson is still in the league. I know he's successful for Colorado, but like, look at his numbers. They've been horrendous for years. And he's still in the league and he's playing. But I'm not going to question anything Joe Sakic's done recently because I think he's clearly one of the better GMs in the league right now. But anyway, do you want to move on to Perron here?
Let's move on here. So Perron's agent has come out and he has stated that Perron, and we all know this, Perron loves and very clearly wants to stay in St. Louis. Love that. Perron and Doug Armstrong here want a reunion. Love that. It's been rumored that the Blues have already extended out a contract here to him and that Perron was not happy with it because it was a 2-year contract, way lower than what he was expecting. Again, this is simply just rumor and whatnot here. So the Blues may need to go 3 years. He's already 34 years old, but boy, he is aging like fine wine. So if the Blues only have $7 million in cap space, if he commands a price tag, say, higher than what, $5 million? He's currently making $4 million, and there's no way he's going to go below $4 million here at this point. No way. He already did the Blues a solid by giving them $4 million. So If he takes $5 million, are you good with that? If he goes higher, like what's your ceiling? Because Evolving Hockey, another contract projection, has him at 3 years, 6.1 AAV, leaving the Blues less than $1 million.
I think we know they have to make other moves to make the salary cap work. I think they will do that. Scandella contract. How many times do I have to say it? It's got to happen. If it doesn't happen, I'm probably going to have a meltdown on this podcast because I cannot handle him being on the roster with that salary cap because that's 3.275 mil right there. So
you are to Scandella as how I used to be with Patrick Berglund. Could not figure out why the team kept Patrick Berglund, the money that they're paying him, the blocking of prospects, all of it. Oh, man. So, yeah, I mean, not to mention just the defensive player blocking, but the cap space that he's eating up.
Can we get somebody like Ryan O'Reilly in a deal with Scandella? I mean, that'd be cool. But I think the ceiling for me would be like 5.5 if you make other moves. I want him to stay, but you can't overpay, especially when you have this good of a forward group. And I mean, he's been really good. Like, we know that. Like, he had a little bit of a lull early in the season, but he figured it out, still scored 20 plus goals. And I would like to see him and O'Reilly finish here, but you can't overpay just because you want to, especially in this salary cap structure and what the Blues have. It's like, you don't want to overpay. You really want to keep him. You don't want to have to lose him again. But I think at some point you call it quits with the negotiations if it's $6 million, because it just doesn't make sense for the Blues at all. Especially, it's not like they're in need of a goal scorer. Like, they had 9 20 goal scorers last year. He was obviously one of them. But next season, if Perron's gone, you're still going to be relying on Buchnevich is going to score. I think O'Reilly will have a much better scoring season next season, even if Perron's gone. And you're going to see a step forward. I think for Kyrou, I think he's a 30-goal guy next year. So I think you don't go above 5.5, and 5.5 even so is probably still too high to a lot of people. So, and it's all about the age. Like, do you sacrifice term for lower cap it? I think you probably do, because Perron's a trustworthy guy who's always going to be effective in some way, I think. But do you do 4 years to get the cap hit to like 4.5 or 4.75? You probably do, right? I mean, if you want to keep him that badly.
Yeah, I definitely think, and I would be one that would be willing to give him an additional year, give him a 3-year contract. 6.1 is going to be way too high for me. Way too high. If you could be able to give him $5 million, I think that's my ceiling. And it's simply just because of everything else that you need to be able to do. Everything else, you're already going to be filling out the bottom of your roster here with some entry-level contracts or just some extremely low league minimum contracts here at this point. If you move out a guy like Scandella, great. Like we said, it accomplishes multiple different things. Can we hit pause here really fast? So you said, and I want to circle back to this, you said package O'Reilly and Scandella.
No, I said, because you said Berglund, right, was the guy that you hated. So Berglund being involved in the O'Reilly trade, can you involve in Scandella in a trade to get somebody of O'Reilly's level?
Okay. That makes sense.
Like a chicker.
Okay. I was gonna say hold the phone here.
I hope other people didn't hear it that way as well and then turned it off by now. But I think O'Reilly's here to stay for a while, and that's an extension you probably look at this summer as well. There's a few extension candidates that they're going to, I'm sure, sit down with and talk with this summer. And, the other thing is, do the Blues eventually want to get Matthew Tkachuk? Because given Perron that much term and over $4 million is going to hurt that.
Yeah.
And that, it's going to affect whether Tarasenko sticks around or not as well.
Yeah. And you have to be able to love what Matthew Tkachuk be able to bring, just as a quick aside here, but what it would cost you to acquire him in the cap space, because he's going to command what, $10 million?
Yeah.
Is that worth it?
It's probably never going to happen, but we can dream for the rest of time.
Maybe we can really convince them let's get a note here on the Cardinals end. Let's let Calgary extend him out, and then let's send them just a bag of pucks and just repeat what we can do here in the Nolan Arenado trade and just replicate that with Matthew Tkachuk. And let's have Calgary pay us to take on Matthew Tkachuk here. I don't know what kind of voodoo that you need to do to make that happen, but let's just mirror the Cardinals and Nolan Arenado in that deal and just mirror that on over to Matthew Tkachuk in the Calgary Flames.
I think the only way that would happen is if somehow magically Chuck Fletcher of the Philadelphia Flyers ended up as the GM of the Flames. I think that's the only way that could happen. I think that's about it.
What kind of blackmail do you need to have on the Calgary Flames and all of their staff or something? Like, what kind of pictures, video, what kind of thing do you need to have in order to make a deal like that happen? So one last thing here on the David Perron front, and this is just an interesting thing. Would you move on from Tarasenko if that meant making cap space for multiple pieces or a guy like David Perron?
I think the only thing that, like, if Tarasenko, if you don't plan on extending him or trying your best to re-sign him next year, I think you do talk about moving him. But I think if he doesn't factor into your long-term plans, then yeah, you got to look at trading him. But if he does, then I don't think you do.
Yeah, and I think it just depends on if Tarasenko reiterates to the Blues that he wants to be dealt or he wants to stay. Because as much as fans, it wasn't that long ago here. We're coming up here on about a year ago to the date that Tarasenko requested a trade.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's reiterated time and time again during every single interview that he's done that he loves the city of St. Louis. He loves the fans. But is it the team? Is it the organization? Is what is it that he would want to be able to move on from? Because to me, everything that he's doing, that he's saying that is that he wants to be a Blue. He wants to stay here in St. Louis. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here on the Tarasenko front.
I think he stays, but I'm not 100% sure of that yet. 80%. I'll take it at 80%. We'll see how the offseason goes. All right, let's finish it up here with offseason wish list. Free agency starts on a date that I don't even know. So there you go. This is professional podcasting because it's like the schedule's all messed up.
Yeah, I think it's July 12th.
That sounds right. July 13th is what I'm reading.
13th, sorry.
It's all the same thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess under a month from now, we'll have free agency. Obviously, the draft, I believe, is the 7th and the 8th.
Mm-hmm. It's on Thursday, Friday this year, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I agree. All right, off-season wish list. What do you got?
You got a guy like Jacob Chikrin. We're just going to keep circling this back. 24 years old. He is cost controlled. And let's face it, he's got a lot more experience than a guy as Scott Perunovich. So in a deal, it's going to be interesting to see if they can acquire him, because if you remember, it was reported that Arizona was asking for a first-round draft pick, a top prospect, and a top player here for him, potentially more than that. So that could include trading somebody along the lines of Scott Perunovich, who is a top prospect, who that fits that bill. You could be able to also lump in a player because Perunovich is NHL ready. You could be able to just lump him in and say, here's a top player that's coming in. You guys aren't ready to compete here just as of yet. So just go ahead and take the age here of Perunovich. But you could then be able to lump in a guy like a Balduke, like a Neighbors, who, there you go. He's got his playing time. He's ready to be able to go then, in a first-round draft pick. You got plenty of other players who are down in the minors that you could be able to throw in there as well. There's no way, shape, or form that I could be able to see Doug Armstrong is going to move on a guy like Joel Hover in a deal to get Chikrin. I don't see that happening, especially with how versatile that Binnington's play here has been. So, Chikrin here for me is near the top here of my list. Of course, you've got Nick Leddy. It just depends on how much he wants.
Nick Leddy helped produce the worst article in the history of St. Louis GameTime.com. I mean, that article was horrific. Sorry.
It was half written.
Had to bring it up. It's terrible.
It was half written.
And what was written stunk too.
I enjoy St. Louis Game Time.
Yeah.
I do. I enjoy their stuff, but I don't get it. I don't get what happened. I don't get what happened there. You know, Nick Leddy, he could be able to command $5 million here next season here as well. He's going to be expensive. Another guy, big physical defenseman that you can be able to look to get, Nikita Zadorov. Calgary may not end up bringing him back. Calgary's got a lot to get figured out here at this point. Don't really know. And of course, you know, you mentioned here 2 different guys. Who do you got?
I got Ivan Provorov and Travis Sanheim, who would both be trades to make. And anytime you get an opportunity to deal with Chuck Fletcher, you do it because he's going to give you what you want for not very much.
Yeah. He's like going to Dollar General.
Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous, but he's going to give you Voracek for Atkinson, which was, I guess, not that bad of a trade, but I mean, he's going to give you Braden Shin for Laterra and a first round pick and all that. So not bad. But on the Chychrun front, the article that I wrote with the blockbuster trades that was heavily criticized by Blues fans, which is fine. We all view players differently. I said Arizona gets Bolduc, Mikkola, Kostin, a 2022 fourth, 2023 first, 2024 third for Chychrun, which I think is probably an overpayment. And I don't think the Blues would ever give this much up. We're just throwing ideas at the wall. Like, why not? And I think people get a little bit ridiculous when they talk about trade prices. Like, people think, like this comment here about the Pastrnak deal. I said Pastrnak to St. Louis, which is never going to happen, by the way. Like, we got to preface that. That's not going to happen. But Kyrou, Bolduc, Mikkola, and a first-round pick for Pastrnak. Okay. Probably an overpayment again, but you're getting a really good player. Somebody said, you're ridiculous to think giving up any of those names you put out there as Blues trade bait besides Scandella make any sense at all, which I guess is fair to say. I don't know, though. Chychrun doesn't improve the team enough to sacrifice giving up the names you mentioned. I think that's fair. I don't think the Blues would actually give that much up. But the names I mentioned, like Kostin and Mikkola, what are they at this point? I don't think that's the big deal. I think Bolduc's the big deal. Even though we're acting like Bolduc's a future superstar because he had a ton of points in the QMJHL, which is not that good of a junior league. But I think he's going to be good. But I think we need to stop acting like he's the next McDavid. Okay, just calm down a little bit, Blues fans. Just a little bit.
Well, everybody wants to feel like you're trading, you know, on easy mode.
Yeah.
Here at this point, so I don't know. You have to give to get.
But I feel like 8 times out of 10 with these big trades, the team getting the big player always gives up way less than we think. Yeah, that always happens. But there's a few where it gets absurd. Seth Jones to give up, you know, Boakfist and first round pick. It's top 5 pick. That's tough. That's tough look. Anyway, somebody said in Pastrnak, please, exclamation point. The guy is a couple years away from a downturn in performance if history holds true. What history? Like, if you look at David Pastrnak and you think he's anything but like a 40 goal scorer every year, you're an idiot. Like, look at the way he shoots the puck. Look at the way that he plays. What is the history that we're talking about here? Injuries? I think that's it. Like, what history needs to hold true for his downturn in performance? To even remotely mention trading the likes of Kyrou, who's only going to continue to get better for years to come. But hey, Kyrou plays like one end of the ice and doesn't really care about back checking. What about the downturn in history there? You could mention that. I mean, I don't get that. But if we end up losing Tarasenko, we're going to need someone on the same line with Thomas to be a top line scoring threat. Pavel Buchnevich. I mean, did he not score 30 goals last season and play with Thomas a ton? I don't understand that comment. Wanted to get into it real quick. I don't understand it, but whatever. I just don't see how you can look at Pastrnak and think there's going to be a downturn in performance because of history. No. Like, what the hell does that even mean? That's the guy that there's like 10 or 15 players in the league where you look at him, you're like, that guy's different. McDavid, McKinnon, Matthews. I would put Pastrnak in that situation because the way he shoots. Like, I just don't understand that comment. But what can you do? You know, I enjoy people reading the articles. I don't go too hard after people in the comment section when they read and reply and I respond. I don't want to go too hard, but I just don't understand a comment like that. But thank you for reading, I think would be my thoughts. And as I'm talking, I just saw a notification on my Twitter. Somebody liked my tweet from last night that says Chuck Fletcher, the worst GM in the NHL. So a lot of mentions for Chuck Fletcher today. Shout out to the Flyers, who will never be good again with him running the show. Anyway, I also put on here for the wish list a fourth line center, because that's going to be something to talk about. Bozak probably retiring, right? I feel like that was probably the end for him.
Yeah, pretty much a foregone conclusion that he's done.
And if
he's not,
career.
I don't think he's. If he doesn't retire, I think his time with the Blues is done.
I would think so. I didn't think he would come back this season, but he ended up taking less to stay, I believe.
Yeah.
But he had a great career. He was good in Toronto for a lot of years, comes to St. Louis, wasn't the same player, but he was very effective for a couple of years. Obviously a big part of winning the cup. His line with Thomas and Maroon during that time, and scored an overtime winner in Game 5 of the second round this year. So shout out to him. Logan Brown and Dakota Joshua are two in-house options. I agree with a commenter of an article that I saw a few weeks ago. I don't know if it was my article or somebody else's, but I'm not quite sure I see the same upside in Logan Brown that a lot of people do. Like, I think he can be a solid player. I wouldn't hate having him as the fourth line center, but I'm not sure he's going to be much of what we thought he was going to be when he was a top 10 pick or whatever. So that's something I worry about. And I think Joshua's good for 30, 35 games a season. I don't think he can be your full-time center. I think he's a good guy to bounce around in between the AHL and the NHL for the entire season, and he's solid.
And it depends on their development here too. These guys could both turn into very good, effective bottom six forwards, that can really contribute several different goals here, potentially 10 plus points, not really expecting a ton, valuable penalty killers. Again, it doesn't bode well here for a former first round draft pick in Logan Brown. We had high hopes here for him here as well, but anything more than a bottom six here potential for both of these guys, which, if you're looking for a fourth line center, fits the bill, but it's nothing more than that. And I think that those two will be great in-house options. Yeah,
I'd agree. And then a couple of out of house options. Ryan Carpenter.
Don't refer to them as outhouse options.
What can you do? Ryan Carpenter, who was playing for Chicago, which I think is what I just said, outhouse, Chicago. 31 years old, solid. Ended up in Calgary last season. He'd be solid. He's kind of your typical bottom six center in terms of what he does. And then an option that I know you like, Nick Bjugstad, 6'6", 215, had 7 goals, 8 assists, 15 points last season in Minnesota. He'd be a good fit, big body, fourth line center. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really enjoy Nick Bjugstad. I don't like the fact, you had some teams who were trying to get him to be more than what he actually is, trying to push him up the forward lines, be able to play him potentially in the top 6. He's just not that guy. He's just not, he can be, he's like a couple of the guys that the Blues have that, if you were to call upon him to kind of mix and match in some of those different lines, but to play as a physical net front presence, great, let him do it. But in the same way of Patrick Maroon, he's destined here for a bottom 6 line, and that's okay. That's okay. You just need those big, tough, physical guys here still as this league keeps getting faster and faster. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just need to be able to rely here upon those guys. And I think a guy like a Nick Bjugstad, who could also command little to no money here at this point, I think he could be a great option for the Blues.
Yeah, I would like the move a lot. But I think that's going to do it for us for episode number 10 of the Blue Note podcast on the Believe Network. We'll be back later this week, more than likely, for episode 11 with a special guest joining us for that. We'll talk about the Blues prospect pool, the draft, all that stuff in the offseason. We'll discuss all that in the next episode 11 coming later this week. But thank you for joining us. You can follow our podcast Twitter at TBNPod. You can follow me on Twitter at Ethan Carter SW. You can follow Mike on Twitter at
Danger Powers 19.
And that'll do it for us. Make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, follow the Twitter. Like I said, listen to the podcast, the Believe Network, the Blue Note podcast, episode 11. We will see you next time.
Thank you for watching Believe. You can find more great content at Believe.com. That's BLEAV.com. Do you believe?